Good morning, good evening. This is First James and Munson Steed, rolling out news report.
You know, and maybe put some in it. The man damn dope. Yeah.
Work.
Yeah, let's continue to just go direct, brother. You want to just take us live, TJ? Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Munson Steed. I'm joined by my co-host, First King James Terry Shropshire, for rolling out news report. Over the next hour, we're going to discuss the very antithesis of where this problem and protest and solution is headed and going to. My dear co host, what is it that you see that is the most urgently addressed anger and issue that our community is having right now?
This is due to marginalization and lack of inclusion and lack of opportunities into the American dream, and they're being mistreated on top of that. It just creates a powder keg. It's a toxic brew that is being mixed and is creating basically the feelings and the sentiments of Black Americans, especially young Black Americans, who don't see that American dream that is posted so vividly on TV. They don't feel like they're a part of it and can reach it, and therefore, and then on top of that, they're mistreated by the police. So it's like something that's simmering beneath the surface for years, that is beneath the detection abilities of the, and then when it explodes, white America acts shocked. They can't believe it. But this is a byproduct of years of frustration that has been brewing, and then it just blew up like a volcano, and that's what we've seen the past week.
There seems to be a conclusion that this protest, even though it is multicultural in some regard, has the agent provocateur in its midst. What are your thoughts on that, given that's your word?
I mean, well, no, I mean, it's just that I read when I was some history books dating back to the 60s and beyond, even into the 20s, with the Marcus Garvey era. And basically, it talks about there's always been presence of people, people slaves who try to break free, people who try to turn in the Moses of our people when they tried to when they were conducting the Underground Railroad. So it's always been somebody who's been a part of the group who has feigned interest in what you're trying to do, and at the same time, they're disrupting everything that the leadership has set up for the advancement of Black people during the time of slavery and leading all the way up to today. That playbook has never changed. And so when we talk about agent provocateurs, it is the job to act like they're with the program, and then they subtly or even blatantly, as we blatantly disrupt what the leadership is trying to do in terms of getting our issues addressed and trying to accomplish the objective of freedom, justice, and equality.
You mentioned equality. It seems like we got brick makers all of a sudden at protest, individuals who've dropped loads of bricks, torch setters amidst the protest, and tat and arsonist. And you've got those individuals that are just writing on walls, and they are not our community members.
Yeah.
What does this do for this protest?
I'm sorry, say that again.
What does this do for the protest? Because can the community distinguish the uprising of our community from anyone else?
I think our community can, for the most part. We recognize it for what it is. There are people more, bringing incinerators, bringing in bricks, or just like that. We have it on our page that was reported on how one young Black woman in Los Angeles caught two white women dressed head to toe in all black to camouflage their appearance. And they're sitting there spray painting on the side of a Starbucks the letters BLM, which stands for Black Lives Movement. And then when they're confronted, they scamper away. They don't answer the questions. They don't stay. They weren't a part of it. So basically, they were, acting like they were with the program, basically just settling in, intertwining with the rest of the people, acting like they're out. And on the side, some of those fires that were that I saw in Atlanta, but also in other cities, those look like professional jobs. Those car fires were brilliant to be something that was started by incinerators or anything, any flammable gasoline things. Just what it does, it messes up. It gets people used the narrative to project justice, equality, and reality. That message lost, and now as we watch CNN, that we're seeing being spilled from the screen is looting, is law, criminality, and destruction of personal property. So that is the dominant theme. Instead of George Floyd, his name is getting buried under an avalanche of lawlessness and criminality, and the reporting of that. So the media is a co-conspirator in this as well, the mainstream predominant media, because they're reporting on that instead of reporting on why we're here in the first place, and that is George Floyd, and for the unfortunate victims in Louisville, Kentucky, and Brunswick, Georgia, and throughout the country, throughout the years, recent and distant past.
Well, we know that it's a pandemic, and we don't want to lose sight from that. We've invited Dr. Stevens to come in. It is clear that this is a pandemic, and the community might be letting its guard down right now. That's a problem. But do we know how severe this problem can turn into right now?
It's going to be hard to tell right now. Hi, everyone. Sorry. Because we're still dealing with increases and spikes in numbers from reopening. So as today, since Friday, Georgia has added over 2,000 cases. We've had over 100 hospitalizations. And this is just the result of opening too soon. So we won't even be able to begin to understand the ramifications of letting our guards down during the protest just these past few days until maybe next week or the week after. So what you're going to have is compounded cases from reopening too soon plus protests.
When you think of protest as an epidemiologist, and you think of 200 to 300 to 400 people in close proximity, why does the virus like that kind of environment? Yes,
because they're yelling, they're screaming. They've basically become super spreaders. So sort of like what you get when you have a choir at a church. And we've actually heard about some of the cases where choirs have spread the virus to over half the members just from either choir rehearsals or even just being in a choir stand in a church. So you're in close proximity and you're actually yelling and screaming. So you're forcefully expelling the virus from your lungs while you're out here. And so if you don't have on a mask, if you're not social distancing, then you're a prime target. And I was running some numbers this morning, and just from protesting in a pandemic. So in order just to even begin to mitigate some of the spread of the virus, 75% of the people that are gathered would have to have on masks, 75%. And that's not happening at all.
Thank you so much. We have, and welcome to the Rolling Out News Report. We've got the executive director of the ACLU, Andrea Young, coming on to share with us what the status is of our community. We have seen an entire militarization of our cities and of our communities. This effect is paramount at this moment during a pandemic. Welcome to the Rolling Out News Report, both Dr. Stevens and Executive Director of the CIU of Georgia, Andrea Young. Welcome.
Great, welcome. Thanks. Glad to be here.
We know that we now see tanks, armored cars, huge guns, individuals in full, not only riot gear, but military gear in our communities, posted up. What's going on?
Yeah. Well, what we've seen across the country is curfews put in place, and often with these sort of curfews and states of emergency, governors have been sending the National Guard into our cities. And we issued a statement today, and ACLUs across the country have issued statements raising concerns about this escalation, this militarization, this restriction on people's civil liberties, both through the curfews themselves, and particularly we have raised the issue in Georgia of this militarization that police, a police presence should be in police gear, not people who look like they're about to storm Osama bin Laden's compound in Afghanistan. I mean, or Pakistan, it's quite extreme what we're seeing. And, we're certainly raising a number of concerns about it, that, the curfews, even the interaction with the curfews should allow people to comply. The intention should be to let people comply and not to arrest them, as we've seen. We've seen people getting, as soon as the clock strikes 9, arrests happening. Arrests, as Dr. Stevens has raised, is, contraindicated in the time of COVID-19. And so we've said, arrest should be a last resort. Taking people into custody should be a last resort, because we have a very high rate of community transmission of COVID-19 in the state of Georgia. Our numbers are at best plateauing, at best. And so it's a very dangerous situation. And for measures that they claim are being taken to protect safety, that these measures the safety is for every single person, right? So the people expressing their First Amendment rights, their safety needs to be protected.
But I'm concerned, and you can help me here, Dr. Stevens, in even our jails. All of a sudden they have an increase in the number of inmates that they're unprepared for, and the close proximity once again, and they're not testing the inmates as they're coming off the streets.
Right. So the jails were already inundated with inmates that they could not treat or even test for. And so then when you add an overabundance of people that they're pulling off the streets who you don't know their status as well. And so again, you are exposing a large group of people who may not have those types of exposures to people who have been confined in close quarters, such as the jail. So no matter how you look at it, either being arrested or just being out in large numbers without masks and social distancing, you are pretty much exposing yourself to the virus. And at probably next week and the week after, the numbers are going to skyrocket.
This militarization, Terry, we've seen it before historically. It never ends well for our community. But Louisville was the example, and I'd like for you to kind of address this, Terry, where the young lady, it seemed like military, where they did the no knock rule and come in her home. It seems as though police and the military have this whole secret thing going on, and then you're in a person's home who is asleep.
Yeah, that's yes, yeah, that's just very curious. The no knock warrant, and while the woman who's Breonna Taylor, whom we must, say that she was a first responder, and she was in her home sleep, obeying the law, fighting on the front lines against, in this war against an invisible enemy, and she's a taxpaying citizen, and yet her rights were not her rights, which she pays for. She subsidized her own death, because she paid taxes to the police department that busted in her home and shot her up and killed her. She paid taxes for that. So it's really kind of a wicked irony, to have your tax dollars subsidize your own death. So that's what we're talking about, is that the quasi military occupation of our communities, because that's what it seems to be. They to protect and serve, for example, in Beverly Hills, but they occupy South Los Angeles. They protect and serve in Buckhead, Atlanta, but they occupy South Atlanta. So it's just one of those things, and that is something that that has led to or incited this type of insurrection that we're experiencing across the country, that seems to not want to die out. So that is basically the scenario that's being played out today.
Yeah.
Ms. Young, the no knock,
Mm-hmm.
the use of what appears to be brutal force, 28 shots. I mean, 28 shots.
Right.
And
done as a mistake. I mean, the level of incompetence alone, because the person they were seeking was already in custody. And the ACLU in Kentucky is working very, very hard to make no knock warrants, something that cannot be obtained, or certainly have to have a much higher level of scrutiny than was true in this case. The only connection that they even alleged was that a package had been delivered for the person who they were seeking, had been delivered to this address. That is not, and so there's almost never a circumstance. I mean, in Georgia, we had a situation where they executed one of these warrants. One of the children was injured. This happens quite a lot, that children are injured. And the couple was able to sue for compensatory damages, but who wants to be in that situation? And this whole idea that people are not safe in their homes. And so I think I have a daughter who's a millennial, and we talk about respectability politics, right? And so there's, so the kids are saying, look, we've done it all. I mean, we went to school, we cut our hair, we have a job, we have an apartment, we're respectful to the police, and yet these things keep happening. And so there, so now that there is video, people see it's not anything that it's not what we are doing. It is a culture of policing that does not, that sees Black people as subjects. I think Joy Reid said quite eloquently, as subjects, not citizens. We've talked a lot at the ACLU about, mass incarceration, and, Michelle Alexander, it's the new Jim Crow. The states that have the highest incarceration are the states that practice legal segregation until quite recently, didn't, and And we saw as segregation diminished, incarceration increased. And it tends to serve the same purpose. People are stripped of their right to vote. People are stripped of access to all kinds of job opportunities, are pushed into being second-class citizens in their own country, in the country that our people, our ancestors built. And so there's very much this history, this legacy, that this is a racial, it is a racially charged way of policing, that Black people are treated differently. And I think that, no one can argue this point anymore.
Well, I think there are a couple more facts than just the basic math. I mean, most of these millennials are at least out of elementary school, they're out of high school, and they can count. 4 people holding the man down, 3 are still at home having cocktails and eating fried chicken and talking about how they're enjoying life with their family while his family is mourning, the country is torn up. They can count. They can count that 0 officers in Louisville have been charged. They can count. So at a minimum, they can count the truth. And they can tell the difference between fact and fiction.
Mm-hmm. And in Georgia, why did 2 random white men think that it was okay for them to hunt down and shoot Ahmaud Arbery for jogging?
No, with the videographer.
Yeah.
It got worse. And a videographer with you to watch you and cover you, right. And then a child that posts it on Snapchat. I mean, it was the postcard from the lynching gone bad in 2020.
Right. Yeah.
So as we see this, Dr. Stevens, during the pandemic, and young people, are they fragile at this moment? Are they likely to let their guard down? And are they likely, at least for me, to bring something back to a parent who doesn't know where they've been?
Absolutely. Because we have to think about in the beginning of the pandemic, the youth were told that they couldn't be affected, which is not the case, because there were a large percentage of 20-somethings that were affected by the virus and actually dying. And so when you throw in that misconception that many of them still don't believe, because they're like, well, I'm young, I'm robust, it won't affect me. And so, but they're not thinking about, it's not about just you. When you go home to your parents who may have chronic diseases such as heart disease or high cholesterol, diabetes, and a lot of times the grandparents are in the home as well, because a lot of the homes are multi-generational, then that's when the risk is even higher. And that's like the thing, that's the message that I have been trying to drive home to the young people. It's not just about you. Yeah, you're robust and you think your immune system may be, great enough to handle this, but what about those loved ones that are at your home that you're taking this virus back to? And then again, we still don't know, because the virus is still evolving. So every month you're learning something new. So
the information is very liquid.
Yes.
It's continually evolving. But I wanted to piggyback off something that you said earlier, in the fact that, I charge the media with the dereliction of duty. They are not doing their jobs, because I went to bed looking at some scenes from the so-called riots, and then I wake up and I see the same stuff. But they're not repeating and reiterating the stuff that you just talked about in terms of how the virus is spread. That is spread further when you are yelling and screaming, or when you are singing in the choir. Your mouth becomes like a lethal projectile, basically. And catches anybody within proximity, or anyone who is orbiting your person can get affected by it. Matter of fact, I heard something from a medical practitioner, one of the epidemiologists, saying that if you stand in an airport and you're near in a crowd, you can affect like 15 people within 3 minutes.
Yes.
And 15 people. So this is the kind of stuff that is not being reiterated. They sit up there, the mainstream media sitting up there regurgitating the same information from the same place about the same events from Los Angeles, DC, Atlanta, New York, Minneapolis, Nothing has changed, but they're not reiterating the invaluable information that we need to know about this virus and how to protect ourselves. So I thank you for coming on to share that information, because we need to hear it over and over and over again until it sinks into our spirit and we respond accordingly.
Well,
Absolutely.
yeah, I'm a little concerned, Executive Director Young, that the young brothers and sisters will be immediately incarcerated. Some of them maybe even just coming home from probation. Some of them just desperate, given the lack of jobs right now. When you think of 40 million people, that's a desperate number.
Yeah.
And you can get caught up even when you didn't plan to go loot, but they have tempted you. And it is unfortunate that we have that. But I think the brutalization of the two students, and then they talked about it was two policemen. Now, if that was two policemen that I saw in the video,
Yeah.
I must have been blind.
Yeah.
And I know I'm not blind today.
Yeah.
So I couldn't have been blind when I saw the video.
Yeah.
Optical illusion.
Is that what it was? Because I saw a whole sea of green.
Yeah.
And if that young lady, how much did she weigh, Dr. Stevens? Just a guess.
You probably weighed about 105, 110 pounds,
Right.
if that.
I mean, she looked like she was twirling.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking at parents who would pay thousands for their child to be at a college.
Tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands, I'm sorry. I guess it ain't thousands anymore, but it's tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands now, yeah.
And you're sitting there, and I'm like, everybody's in green.
We did not
Hey, are
see
you
what
guys
led
at our
up
shot?
to this. But here,
Come
clearly
to our
this
shot.
young man behind the
Okay,
wheel
so
has
just
been
to give you a little
tased.
background, we were here on the scene. We turn around and we see several officers go up to the car and start breaking the glass. We're not sure what led up to this. There was a woman in the front passenger seat and a gentleman in the driver's seat. They're pulling him out now. A lot of now, of course, the crowd has caught on to what's happened. We have no idea what led to this. They flattened the tire, broke the glass to the car, and I hear what I believe to be a taser. So you can see this young woman is being arrested, was taken out of the car, and then on the other side, we've got the driver who is also being arrested and several officers around him. I have no idea what exactly led up to this.
Yasmina, the Atlanta Police Department has just...
Did it look like two to y'all? It looked like two.
Well, two times, yeah. Two times something.
Was it two soldiers or was it two police? Which one was it? Because I didn't see two. Did you see two?
Yeah, I think there are another 3 that have put on desk duty pending investigation. But, you know, when you see, they've shown also the body cam.
Yes.
And what you see is that they go up to the window, they break the glass. So not only did they put them face down on the ground, but they did it over broken glass.
Yes.
And did, you know, I think for people, you know, I would say for white people who have never experienced traffic stop as a Black person, you know, to see the sort of the yelling, you can't really understand what the officer is saying. You know, he's probably trying to get his seatbelt open, and then they accuse, you know, then they're trying to say, oh, we thought he was going for a gun. I mean, it all happened so fast, and people are, you know, the sort of reaction. And the other thing we understand is that they had just waved through a carload of white people.
No, and 27 stitches and a fractured arm. I mean, that sounds like a muscle man. You know, I didn't. Both of them look like small statued children.
Oh, they were. I mean, and doing absolutely not. They were trying to leave. So if you know Centennial Olympic Park, the streets around there are very congested. Many of them are one way, and so if a lot of people are trying to leave at the same time, you know, anybody who's ever been to a basketball or football game in Atlanta knows it is very hard to evacuate that area. And people and the police.
It's unbearable.
Yeah, and so to have folks yelling and everything is blocked off, and then there's tear gas. I mean, it was a horrible thing, and so that's why our statement has been to say, the purpose of law enforcement should be to facilitate compliance, help people who want to leave the scene leave, allow people to leave. Don't arrest them for disorderly conduct when they're leaving.
But it was also the use of force. I mean, it was tantamount of killing a roach with a sledgehammer. Yeah. It was just so over the top that it just boggles the mind at what was going through their head that could have instigated this behavior.
They treated them like terrorists trying to get through a military checkpoint, in Iraq or something. I mean, that was the level, the number of people who surrounded them. And I mean, it's terrifying. The poor children will probably have post-traumatic stress disorder. But the truth of it is also, it was live on tape, and they went to Morehouse and Spelman. And so I think those two things meant that there was a rapid response, at least on the two officers that had the primary contact with them. But the problem is, what about other children who don't have the president of Spelman to write a letter on their behalf? What about the things that are, or who didn't happen to have the television cameras watching and rolling at the moment that they were also, hurt by the police? And so, that's the other concern, is that, yes, this was the right thing to do in this instance, but what about all the other people who, were hurt by rubber bullets, who were hurt by tear gas? Often when they're trying to leave, when they're trying to actually, comply and follow directions.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And with the fact that, but at least Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms acted swiftly and decisively, unlike Louisville, Kentucky, where they're still trying to figure out if there was a crime being committed. I mean, it just boggles the mind. Or in Brunswick, Georgia, where it took the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, the state police, to basically come to that joke of a district attorney down there, and in 2 days. But it took 2 months.
2 months of community action.
Right. And so, so at least in this particular situation, the action was decisive, but it was still deplorable.
And what's so heartbreaking about Brunswick is that mother buried her son believing that he had burglarized a home. I mean, the lie that the police told is all the evidence that is what she was told when she was burying her son. And it wasn't until later it came out that nothing could be further from the truth. And so it's also that, it's not only that they damage people's reputations in the community, but even with the memories of their own loved ones, that then wonder, well, how did he go wrong? Well, and there are multiple tapes now of the kind of mistreatment of Ahmaud Arbery in Brunswick. I mean, it's something that's happened to so many young men that they are just, it's almost like they're hounded by the police, and anything that they can't even sit by a park. He was accosted by the police for, sitting by the park on his day off. He works 6 days a week. Like so many of our young men that work so hard to try to get ahead, and yet they're constantly roadblocks put in their way. Once you get an arrest record, employers don't want to hear the rest. It doesn't matter how unjustified it was. They don't want to hear the rest. They just, you can just so easily be written off or lose the job that you had just from, so the police misconduct goes so far in undermining opportunities for our young people.
But even in this case, video has played a role. I think the idea that we have video even in that, it seemed like a leap though. Him being by the park, as much as we wanted to see it, it probably wasn't even in his best light. Mm-hmm. It was a brother who worked every day, had some dreams deferred, and just wanted a moment with him and God to just rest on his day off.
Mm-hmm.
And if the world would just leave him alone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you know, as a brother, you already feel that isolation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that, you know, every civil rights leader felt isolated, even though they were surrounded by people. But that spin machine starts to destroy the very fabric and character of people because they slipped that out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They slipped that out. That wasn't oh, we requested. That was a slip.
Yeah, and I think we have to work very hard at countering these narratives. There's another one that says, you know, he was he was on probation for, you know, stealing a TV from Walmart. How do you take a TV out of Walmart? I mean, all that it takes is, you know, and so our young people, they don't have public defenders, they don't have a defense. You know, they're falsely charged. They're offered an opportunity without counsel, you know, to avoid being in jail, and they agree to things they didn't do. I mean, the kind, and you can see that this police department in Brunswick and this district attorney, I mean, they have no integrity, they have no credibility. You know, even the police chief they hired to clean up the department is in ethical trouble. So they are incredibly, the district attorney in not immediately referring the case to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation and the Attorney General of Georgia, she violated the rules. So even when she realized that she had a conflict, her first responsibility was to call the Attorney General and say, I have a conflict in this case. And had she followed the rules, then this case would have been investigated properly months ago. So she's been, and we have called for her to step down. And if she doesn't step down, we're going to, you know, work to make sure when she's standing for election at the polls that people understand her record and understand how she is abusing the people of Brunswick and abusing her office. She is not fit to be district attorney and have people's futures in her hands.
Yeah,
I just wanted to say one thing about what was said about youth not knowing how they sign away their rights. And I think it's important to start educating our youth early on that when you are detained by the police, these are the things that you need to know. The same way they are taught their ABCs, phonics, you need to teach them how to deal with the police when they are detained. And so many of our youth are serving time for crimes they didn't commit because they were ignorant to the fact of the law.
And scared to death.
And scared to death, not to mention. Yeah. So we have to now start educating our children, our teens, our youth. If you are detained by the police and they are charging you with something, this is what you should do. And make sure that it sticks. And it's not going to be taught in schools. We have to teach it at home.
Right. And there has to be severe consequences. You were talking about Ms. Young about the abuses. There has to be severe consequences for people who abuse or misuse the law. And that's not just in the district attorney's office or police officers. It's also for that individual in Central Park or Barbecue Becky in Oakland, or the one who told on the little girl who was selling a hot dog or water. There has to be severe ramifications. I mean, the young lady in New York City, Central Park, she lost her job. But when you file a false police report, that is a crime against the law. So it doesn't matter if she lost her job. She needs to be prosecuted so that other people can see her get prosecuted, and therefore they'll think twice about abusing the law, because if that guy had stayed there, he could have ended up in the same situation that we're talking about the other three today, possibly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the other thing in following up with that, Terry, is that the community has no military of its own. So you're in a war against someone who is totally armed and can make any excuse in their brutal use of force. And the district attorneys appear to be doing the same thing. the police pension, I think taxpayers need to have some kind of revolt so that they don't find that safety net where the union says, well, the city will pay out 20 million. Mm-hmm. I think it literally should come from the funds of that group. Mm-hmm. And I think they think twice about having such bad behavior. But since it doesn't bother their pension, I think we should have the ACLU think about the taxpayers not paying the burden for brutalized murders where the policeman was found guilty. Yeah. Because that would make the entire crew begin to think twice about pulling the trigger on a brother running away, which we've seen, right, on a brother's neck. But if there's no KPI, like if I really can't see the impact on our pension, then we're not going to have solutions. And so even today, I'm asking you, as you and the big thinkers in the legal realm for the rights, the citizens are paying. The mothers of these children are paying for the price that their child, they're paying twice.
Yeah. No, I mean, you raise a good point, and we are, the ACLU has been working, for a long time on, trying to change police behavior, and we are looking at getting more creative. I think you'll be hearing some things this week about some other proposals that we have to really, really address this issue of funding. And it is really something that has persisted. We've tried a lot of options all the way back, and the Black community has asked for a lot of interventions, to improve outcomes for our communities. And the only thing we've pretty much gotten is more police. We wanted after-school programs, we wanted midnight basketball, we wanted public health, we wanted mental health services. Only thing we get is police. So, that's got to stop.
Oh, don't forget, we're asked to apologize after we're abused. See, after we're abused, after our children are killed, just like this situation in New York, they put the cameras on that guy in Central Park, and they basically pulled him into an apology. Yeah. See, she's not forced to apologize, but he has to apologize for being abused. Yeah. And then, they want you to apologize and say, well, don't commit violence, which you shouldn't. Right. But shouldn't the people who are committing the violence in the first place be told not to commit violence instead of the victims? So yeah, first off, we got to mention that we're always told to apologize and to forgive.
Yeah. But I will say, for a lot of these folks, the sheriffs, the district attorneys, these people run for election. And we have to start paying attention. The ACLU is involved in sheriff's races and DA races around the country to try to educate people that they can vote out these district attorneys. They can vote out these sheriffs. And that's a place to start. There's not one silver bullet, but these are very important places to start it's a primary in Georgia on June the 9th. So for anyone listening from Georgia, I say get mad and vote. Take that anger to the polls. Do all the other great things that you're doing, but don't forget to take that anger to the polls and vote these people out. Vote them out.
Yes, and that's one of the main things that I've been saying, because everybody's like, oh, just make sure that these people down there protesting, are registered to vote. And it goes beyond being registered. Are they actually voting? And so I think we need to take greater measures in making sure that they are aware of the elections that are coming up, being held, who's running, background, and everything like that. Because I've gotten calls today saying, I'm new to this, I don't know what to do. We need help. We're young. So what should we do? We need guidance. Like how do we vote? Who can you get somebody to come and talk to this group of teens who are turning 18 and being registered to vote about how voting works, because that's not being taught.
So I think they're going to need the ACLU to put on some trainings. It is very obvious that we need some trainings with the ACLU and the community so that all of those things can be addressed. Young people can have their ABCs of how to interact with the police in a very lawful way without never actually speak without representation.
Right.
And the police are not your representation when you're under arrest.
Right.
We want to thank you, Ms. Young. I know you have to go, but we do want to say, as you are in that big think tank over there at the ACLU, that we're very proud of you. We are always in your own right. We know you come from a great pedigree, a super mom and a super dad who have given so much to this community. And now their daughter is truly given again. So we thank you for being who you are. But I will say as you leave, if we don't hit them in their pensions, they will forever keep their knee on our neck. If it has no economic, fiscal impact, nobody changes behavior unless it financially causes the entire herd to lose something. And at this point, the herd does not lose. And cities begin to negotiate that when they're talking to these unions, because the loss is too big for the citizens. And why should a mom pay twice for her son once they have been murdered by the police?
Yeah, good point. Well,
thanks so much.
To be with you. Thanks for all the work that all of you all are doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So for all of us who are here, this pandemic and the fact that we're in a pandemic and people have been out for many days, fatigued and hungry, how does that affect them during this pandemic, given that there's a disease out there, a virus?
So as I've been saying for these past few days, it first of all, it hinders your ability to think clearly. And secondly, it weakens your immune system, so it makes you more susceptible to disease. So where you are a young person and you're out and you're protesting and you haven't had anything to eat, or you're just dehydrated, it weakens your immune system. So where you think you're robust and you can't and that you can actually fight this virus or you won't be affected, that's not true. You're actually weakening your immune system.
Well, we know we've been joined by Keith Strickland. Hey, Keith.
Hey, how you doing, sir?
Come on. We know we got Dr. Kenyatta Stevens here. We got First King James, Terry Shropshire. You down at the march today?
Yeah, I am. I want y'all to notice I got my mask on today, so I hear you.
Okay, thank you.
I also, what you say, doctor?
I said thank you.
My pleasure. I also want to add, when you guys were talking about the Know Your Rights campaign for our youth, we've been doing that in partnership with the U.S. Attorney's Office and with district attorneys across the state since 2016 now in the state of Georgia. So we go into different high schools and middle schools where we have a district attorney, we have a prosecutor from their office. We have usually somebody from the defense team. We have a U.S. attorney. We have somebody from the sheriff's office, and sometimes the FBI, sometimes DEA, but they talk with the youth, and we all talk about, and then I speak from a convicted felon standpoint. We all talk about how the law affects you and what your rights are, but also to understand the different consequences of the laws when you break laws. So I'm a huge advocate of that too, because I became a convicted felon at the age of 16, and I got arrested for the first time at the age of 13. But I want to show you guys something down here from the protest, and I just want you to see that we have Army guards walking around with machine guns, and we have all of this already. It's only 7. They've been out here since about 7 o'clock, but you see, like, they're already getting ready. And it's been tough, man. Like, they had police all the way from DeKalb County to Gwinnett County to Douglasville in downtown Atlanta yesterday with the guards, with special troops. And as you can see, these guards here, they wave at you. They're pretty friendly. But the guys who just walk by, they won't even make eye contact with you. So you have different energy even against the different law enforcement. Like when they went past these guards, they wouldn't even speak to these, to the reserves. So just imagine if you have different energy between the different law enforcement agencies and the different branches of the Army, how does that feel for you? So it's not the most comfortable thing.
Keith, for
Yeah,
those
they
of
have different missions that they're told to execute.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. What was that?
the young people that are now downtown, they're peacefully protesting.
Oh yeah, I'm finna walk you over to the protest right now. Like I said the other day, it's extremely peaceful. If you throw up a right hand, everybody else joins you with it. People walking around passing out water to each other. So there's no chaos. There's no, people have their families and their children down here. So while you see the guards, you see people walking with their families. So it's not like this is something where it's chaotic or where people look like they're about to cause havoc. This is a family event. And you got the guard and you got Army troops all up and down the street walking around with machine guns. But people are down here with their families.
So what does that say to our youth when they think about protesting when they're surrounded by machine guns and tanks?
I had a conversation with the governor's office early this morning. One of my friends was killed last night on Peachtree Street, shot and killed in his car. I just found out about it this morning. And ironically, I got the call from the governor's office while I'm getting the text message that my friend was found dead in the car. And what a lot of my friends were saying was that, man, it makes you feel like a criminal just for wanting to stand up for your rights. You know, I mean, just like with him last night, he didn't do anything to anybody. They were literally they were in their cars just standing out. And the police came and made them leave. And as soon as they got to the light, somebody shot him in his car. So it's like, it's inciting the violence. It's inciting the problems. Like if you look at these people, you look right now, you see no violence. You don't see any violence. Even with the guards over here, they're standing there peacefully right here. Like there's no need to have machine guns out here. There's no need for all of that. Like you're already treating people like animals and like criminals before they did anything wrong. And these people are just coming out here because they're tired of being treated like third-class citizens. They're tired of, right now it seems like your only option is you either live in poverty or you die like an animal. And people are tired of this. That's continued trauma every single day. And people are just tired of living through this trauma. And you shouldn't be treated like a criminal just because you're saying that you deserve a better quality of life. Because you don't want your children to grow up with the same risk and the same fear that you grew up with.
How many people down there? It seems like you have a mask on, but I don't see a lot of masks there, Keith.
Oh, most of the people I see have masks. This young man next to me has on masks. Everybody right here has on masks. They have on masks. I mean, honestly, I don't know if the cameras are picking it up well, but I would say the majority of people here do have on masks. And then if you notice, people are standing, for the most part, people are standing with some distance in between them except for with the groups that they're with. So, I mean, most of the people I see have on masks.
So when
of course,
you
see
say
some people without masks, but most of the people I see have on masks.
So you say it's about an 80-20, a 30-70?
I would say about an 80-20. Like, I mean, most of the people I'm looking at have on masks.
So we're making some progress, you think, in getting the message
I
out
mean,
about.
I mean, from what I saw, I've seen people with masks. I've seen people ask people, could they back up when they're talking to them if they don't have on masks? So, and you see the Army has it blocked off up here. I mean, you do have some people that don't have on masks, you do. But for the majority, it seems like they have on masks.
What would you say is the mood or the mood down there in terms of comparison in previous
I'm sorry,
days?
I can't hear you guys.
Okay, yeah, it is quite loud down there, but I was just trying to assess the mood down there in comparison to the previous days. Yes, it's a little loud, so you can't hear me.
We've got Ms. Pruitt, who is Terry, would you like to introduce?
Yes, Ms. Sonia Pruitt is a 28-year police officer veteran in suburban Washington, D.C. She is the chairman of the National Black Police Association, And so we welcome Ms. Pruitt here today. She has spoken with us before in regards to some of the things that she has encountered being on the front lines. So we salute her for fighting, being on the front lines and helping to carry on with law and order, being in proximity to suspects and just people in general. So we like to salute Mr. Sonia Pruitt. Welcome aboard again.
Hi.
Yeah, welcome to Rolling Out. Welcome to Rolling Out News. With
Thank you.
Yes. And so I wanted to ask you in regards to picking up on what we talked about before, based upon what you've seen this past weekend across the country, your thoughts and your feelings from your unique perspective.
I've given probably about 7 interviews today, and I'm gonna tell you, I am running out of words. It seems like every 5 minutes there's a different and a new aspect to all of this. We just saw this guy in the White House come out and make some comments that were totally ridiculous and inflammatory. I mean, are we serious?
Oh, you're talking about, and for those who don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Mr. Trump. Yes, because you live right down the street from the White House, being in Montgomery County, Maryland,
right,
suburban Washington, and he, had a press conference in which he enumerated the numerous institute some, including the 1806 insurrection law that enables him to deploy the U.S. military on the streets of America to maintain law and order. He said that he is the law and order president, and that he will win, and that he will. He classified. It's interesting who he chooses to classify as domestic terrorists, because Antifa is the first group in American history to be called a domestic terrorist. Not the Ku Klux Klan, or white supremacists, not the neo-Nazis, not the people who blew up Oklahoma City during the Oklahoma City bombing, not the people who walked through and caused disruption in Virginia last year. No, but the first group is Antifa. But the interesting is that the mood that he set based upon his inflammatory rhetoric. And so I wanted to make sure I gave the people some context.
Okay. And I'm sorry for just jumping in, like everybody knew what I was talking about. It's the last thing, the latest thing that was on my mind as I was taking a little break and resting before I knew I was going to talk to you, and saw it on television. I'm like, what? Where is this that we are? So
well, it seems like to me, piggyback on Dr. Stevens. By the way, this is Dr. Kenyatta Stevens.
Hi, Dr. Stevens.
She works on the front lines against this war with this invisible enemy.
Public health
she's dealing
activist.
Okay.
Yeah, and so she's basically dealing with a pandemic, and then you're dealing with an epidemic right here in America because it's domestic, and both of them, both the pandemic and epidemic are fluid. The information keeps flowing daily. It keeps changing. Yes. It's almost like a salamander or an amphibian. It keeps changing colors, changing shapes.
Yes.
Every day is something different. And so people are just confused about the coronavirus, and they're confused about the direction that the country is about to go in from the top down. So, but I'll allow you to continue your thoughts about what your feelings are in regards to this past weekend.
I was trying to remember the last time I talked to you, but since that time, I have personally gone through a range of emotions. My words, my thoughts are all over the place. I can't find the right word. I actually sent out a group text to my board of the National Black Police Association asking them, how do you feel? I want to speak in your words. What are you feeling right now? And then last week it was just really bad. I had a little breakdown, crying. I called my girlfriends. We all crying together because this is a lot. Our people are in danger.
Heavy.
And here I am as a police officer, and I know police culture. 28 years of it. And this all started with Mr. Floyd and how he was just discarded. And now here we are, because people are fed up. Somebody asked me today, so what do you think about this lawlessness? I ain't thinking about that. As a police officer, just as a regular citizen, I don't condone it. But I'm thinking about the fact that you done had your knee on my neck and the neck of the people that I love and the people who look like me for hundreds of years, and you want to ask me about some lawlessness now. It's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot. And police officers, Black officers and some white officers are like, okay, you know what? This is okay. We can't keep letting this happen, okay, to us or to anybody else. And I applaud the white officers who have stepped up and said, you know what? Okay, I get it. But what I really want to hear from those officers who are kneeling, I want to hear out of their mouths them say, I will no longer allow the abuse of people, anybody, especially Black people, in my presence. I will not participate, and I will not allow it to happen. That's what I want to hear. I don't want to see you kneeling and having, people take pictures. That's cute. I need action. And when I talk to my peers who are executives and these police chiefs, come on now. I feel like Val Demings. What the hell are we doing?
Yes. And just wanted to make sure that people are aware that we're looking at live footage based courtesy of Mr. Keith Strickland of the protests in Atlanta in the vicinity of CNN building. As you can see, the crowd is a little bit more sparse than it has been in previous nights. The temperature is lower, much lower than it was the other night on Friday night. And so, as I said that, I just wanted to talk to Dr. Stevens. So you were talking about you're not just a doctor, you're just not a medical doctor, you're also an activist. Yes. And you're a Black person first and foremost. And that's where we all have that commonality. And so I wanted to talk about the superficial dressing that's been put on the wound of Black Americans today with the, first of all, with the, we got someone under arrest. He's in maximum security. They're talking about, some different things the measures that they're taking place in Minnesota. They're investigating the police officers in Louisville, Kentucky. So I just wanted to talk about, from an activist perspective, your feelings about, well, it's almost as if America is saying, well, isn't this enough? We've given you some, we got you some changes. We got the guy arrested. So why can't y'all go home? What y'all screaming about? Why y'all mad? Or still mad?
Yeah, it goes beyond that. And I think it's, as I have been labeled a public health activist, it goes beyond just an arrest. It goes beyond, we are dying not just at the hands of police, we are dying from socioeconomic disparities and health inequities that existed before this pandemic, that is still ongoing, and that will exist after this pandemic, because most of the Black and brown communities don't have quick access to hospitals. You still have to drive just to get adequate care. I mean, and there are just so many things that contribute to the poor health that Black America is facing. And so we're not just marching just for our civil rights, we're marching for health rights, equal access to health care, being treated like a human being when we walk into a hospital emergency room or a clinic, or how Black women, I read today that Black women with PhDs are more likely to die during childbirth than a white woman with a high school diploma.
Wait, can you repeat that? That's like an oxymoron. Can you repeat that?
A Black woman with a PhD is more likely to die during childbirth than a white woman with a high school diploma. And that's because they don't listen to us, and we're not treated as human beings at the end of the day.
Well, to go back to that statement, that
maternal morbidity,
yes,
is high in Black women in 2020 of all of of all things. So there's so many things that are happening in the health of Black America right now. And then when you compound that with our civil rights being violated, what do they expect us to do? Just pack our bags and go home? Like, you get your balls and you go back home? No, it doesn't work that way. Because we weren't created to just be docile human beings. We came here fighting and we'll leave here fighting. But what I want to tell these people out here protesting is be strategic and live to fight another day.
That's exactly what I wanted to bring up. And before I go
quick
back to you,
guys. I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you guys see this? Can you see the guards standing up inside of the buildings?
Oh, like snipers?
Yeah. Do you see this?
Yes.
They're on all the floors inside the building.
Yes, I see it now. Yeah, they're on that right side, right there on the right side of the building. Yeah, I see them.
Yeah. I just think about how that makes you feel when you're down here with your family and you're trying to do a peaceful march. People down here with their children. Just think how that makes you feel. You got snipers standing above you in the building.
It's just like being in a prison yard.
What was that, ma'am?
It's like being in a prison yard where they let you out of your cell or your rec time. Watching you.
That's an excellent point.
You know what? Growing up, we used to have a thing called Red Dog. The Red Dog was a special task force of the police, but the Red Dog would check us every morning coming out of my yard just to go to school. They would pat us down, put guns to us. This is middle school, high school, just walking out our front door. So truthfully, this isn't very different than what a lot of us are already used to.
Oh yeah, I grew up in Decatur. I'm East Side all day in the 90s. So this right here is something that we are accustomed to.
Yeah. I mean, I remember a police officer hit me with a gun right here, broke my jaw. This was at a park in front of a woman with her children. It was one woman with a baby with a stroller, and she had one child in her hand. So they had to be like a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, and then she had a small baby in a stroller. Police officer got to arguing with me, hit me across the side of my face, and they arrested me, but they wouldn't let me see a paramedic or anything. So my jaw peeled back broken. But I mean, that's just what life was like growing up. I grew up between Campbellton Road and Bankhead. That's just what we had to be accustomed to.
Yeah.
So for a lot of us, like I'm saying, I get the frustration for our youth. Like, I saw a video of a child telling their mother to be quiet while she was getting pulled over. The child was telling the mother to be quiet because she said, "Mom, I don't want you to get shot." This was maybe a toddler. She looked like she couldn't have been more than 4 or 5 years old. We can't allow our children to grow up with that being what they consider life. And if it takes having to protest, if it takes having to march, like, look at all these police over here, y'all. Just look at this. And again, this is peaceful. And look at all of them just lined up over here ready. And have you guys seen anything that even looks like an act of violence? You see all of this?
I mean, you didn't see that many police officers on the Chicago steps.
So let me ask you this. If this is how we're responding in a city that's run by Black government, right? I mean, they didn't start doing this until people's property started getting damaged. Our lives weren't worth this. You know what I mean? Like, I had it was called a Bloody Summer in Atlanta. It was, I believe, 2008 when New Orleans, when they started moving down here. 18 of my friends died every week. So every week there was a shooting for 18 weeks straight, right? We didn't see more police presence in our neighborhood, but as soon as the Buckhead population started having their properties broken into, you see police come from all around the city. You see guards come out.
All around the state.
So, I mean, it shows you what a value is. In a city that's run by Black government, right? You had Killer Mike come on live television to calm down a protest with a shirt that says "Kill Your Master" on it. Mm-hmm. Like, these are things we're not talking about. His shirt said "Kill Your Master," but you're there to tell the hip hop population who did not bust out the first window, who did not start the first fire. You're there to speak specifically to them as if they're the problem with a shirt that says "Kill Your Master." And the first thing that comes out your mouth is how you have compassion for police because you have police officers in your family. Now, when you were becoming a millionaire, making music that was promoting death and violence and drugs to our children, your police family members didn't come out your mouth then. So you can tell our children nonsense and craziness so that you can become popular and so that you can build money and get influence. But then when you get the city behind you, you come back and then you want to rationalize not to do these things. We have a lot to talk about. We have a lot to focus on as a population and as a culture. But if we're going to talk about it, we got to be honest. Like, our Black leadership is not looking out for the Black person, especially the low-income Black person. And then a lot of people who we put on these pedestals, they're the same people who are telling our children this recklessness, that the stuff that does get them in these problems.
Well, I do think it's has something to do with the fact that when they allow you to make a little bit of money, the few of us, the small percentage at the top, they want you to use your money and your influence in the proper way in which to basically bolster the status quo and not, upset the apple cart. And so I believe that is the case. But I wanted to just for a moment move over to Mrs. Pruitt because thank you for coming on to Rolling Out News. But I wanted to talk about specifically the perspective of a Black police officer. And like I said, I experienced this on a much lower case, being in the United States military as a military cop. It's the duality inside of you where you want justice, but you are commissioned to uphold and to enforce the law. And I just wanted to understand. Keith, can you put that on mute for just a few minutes, please, sir?
Yes, sir. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. No, it's okay. I'm glad you're here. No, I appreciate it. But I just wanted you to talk about that because I think that's another thing that gets confused is that when I saw, people throwing bottles at the cops, it didn't matter if they were Black or white. They treated them all the same, but they're Black men and women who have the same feelings as everyone else in terms of they feel the same way about injustice. So I want you to give the perspective of a Black police officer and what you go through, what's already a stressful job to begin with.
I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know if that was to me, but I will say this. Growing up, the police officers who did things in our neighborhood were Black police officers. Like, I very rarely had a white police officer as a child forcing us to be patted down in the rain or while it was freezing cold.
Because they were in the neighborhood. Back then.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, the faces that we saw were Black law enforcement agents, but they treated us horribly. Horribly.
Yes, right, exactly. And I wanted to get the perspective of Miss Pruitt, who's spent 28 years in the police department in Montgomery, and she also made history as the first Black woman to become a captain in the police force in Montgomery County, Maryland, just outside of Washington, D.C. So thank you. Take yourself off mute and just give your perspective of how hard it is to be a police officer who's also have the feelings that the masses of Black people have in terms of the feelings of injustices, the feelings of just the hurt. So if you could speak to that for briefly, please.
You hit on a lot of stuff. So becoming the first African-American female captain in my police department, which is about 99 years old. On the one hand, it was a great accomplishment. On any level, it was a great accomplishment. But on the other hand, that it took 99 years for that to happen. And I'm one of 2 Black female executives, just 2. The other one is a lieutenant. There's trauma. We have trauma, Dr. Stevens. Black police officers have trauma. Some of us don't know who we are, where we came from, what we're fighting for. Some of us absorb the police culture because either it's easy or we really think that this is the way to go. It's almost like it's like a gang where you're promised this brotherhood and this sisterhood and they're going to take care of you and we all one. But you're all one until you say something or do something that they're not, the whole is not in agreement with. Then you are castigated, you are ostracized, you are talked about, you are treated like doo-doo.
You're almost exiled inside the department.
Oh, absolutely. Right? And so, I've never said this before, but it occurred to me that Dr. Stevens, this is trauma.
It is.
Then we have to go home to our people who might see us as the enemy because we wear a uniform. When I was growing up, there was a Black sheriff. I grew up in a small North Carolina town. There was a Black sheriff's deputy, unheard of, but there he was. And we all looked up to him. He was not the reason I became the police. My father was a police officer. But it's a lot to have to deal with. So I can understand why some Black officers take the easy way out and just like, you know what? I ain't gonna make no noise. I'm gonna get this paycheck, take care of my kids, get this pension, and get out of here. But then there are those of us who cannot. No, that I ain't made of that. Okay, I'm not made of that. And then you have to. The way you navigate is you find a mentor. My mentors were outside of the department for the most part. There were some, but as they went on to bigger things, I would have to find somebody else somewhere else because there was nobody who looked like me.
Yes.
I mean, there were Black men, but I mean, that's a whole nother line of conversation.
Yes.
And so then you cope by finding a mentor, and you cope by hopefully having family and friends who will support you, lift you up, and surround you with love. And then 3, you got to have a really good counselor. And I'm saying that with everything I mean. I mean, everything I feel. You have to have something, an outlet, somebody to talk to, some professional help. It is deep and it is real. So when people say those Black police officers ain't doing nothing, on the one hand, you might have some who aren't, but try to have some compassion for what they might be going through. But on the other hand, people like me who are very outspoken, we got some slave stripes on our backs.
Right.
And they putting up roadblocks, and they're doing stuff like threatening your spouse, which is what they did when I was a younger officer.
Excuse me?
Yes. They threatened to hurt my husband because I wouldn't shut up.
I see. Wow, that's deep.
There was no criminal investigation.
Okay. And that's deep. But you know what? It is deeper and it's worse because you're an African American, and it's even worse because you're a Black woman. So it's like several layers deeper than just what white officers have to put up with. Because when I was a kid, I was a tiny kid, and I saw the movie from one of my favorite actors, Al Pacino, Serpico, that dealt with police culture, and I dealt, so they did have another level that they deal with, but then you compound that with being Black and being a woman. It's just really intense. So it looks like there's a price to pay for just going along with the program, but there's also a price to pay for speaking out, and you just have to pick your poison and then roll with it. Is that right? Am I being accurate?
You are accurate.
Okay.
I just want to say that even still, you being a Black female police officer, and being that you yourself are victimized because you're being threatened, and then to go into a community where they don't separate you, they don't see you as Black. So when you become a police officer, you lose your race, you lose your ethnicity.
She loses her Black card.
It's not even a Black card, but officers in general, they suffer the most from PTSD. Most people think that PTSD is only associated with war, and it's not. It's any type of emotional trauma that you experience as a result of a situation. And so basically that's what's happening for her, and it's not being acknowledged because it's like, well, you're a police officer, you're supposed to be tough. But how do I separate being a Black human being with family, with friends, with loved ones that are being affected, but then I'm also an officer that has taken a sworn duty to protect and to serve?
Yes. And Dr. Stevens, add to that, as a Black woman, and this is nothing against Black men, King, because I love Black men. But when you have Black men who are also putting up roadblocks in your career because of whatever their stuff is, whether they're also traumatized, or whether they're jealous, or whether there's hate, or whatever it is. So I can't even look to my brothers to support me and to protect me.
Right.
Black men, I'm just gonna say this. They aren't really taught to be expressive of their feelings. So even if they wanted to support you, they wouldn't know how. So they're going to go with the emotion that they identify with the most. And that's being this stoic, staunch police officer that has to be emotional. And
Yes.
If y'all don't,
Catching from you.
No, we were about to go. I'm sorry. We were about to come back to you to give you a final word as we close out the coverage on Centennial Park about what you're seeing and what you're feeling and the sentiment of the people that you've walked around and been interacting with, intertwined with.
when I got off from with you guys on the last video, it was right around 9 o'clock. You ended it because of the curfew. I decided to stay at my building so that way, if anybody got injured or anything happened, my building is right here by Centennial Park. So they ended up shooting the tear gas right out after I got off with you guys. Then they shot tear gas into a crowd. Somebody shot at the police. The police shot back at them. I opened up the building. I was able to get about 3 dozen women into the building, and a couple of guys also, but mostly young ladies. And then we were able to get them back to their cars. That was a really tough night. Like, somebody ended up flipping over in front of me on their car trying to get on the highway. They got hurt really bad. It was just a lot. But I wanted to say this: it's a lot of Black men who are standing up for our queens, and I got snapped on and talked to really negatively while I'm putting my life at risk to help out a lot of our queens, right? I think that we had to do a better job on all angles, on teaching us how to love ourselves, teaching us how to love each other. Because last night, well, that wasn't last night, Saturday night, when everything happened down here, you saw so many of our people just looking out for themselves. I mean, I understand people were afraid, but you saw so many people just running and not thinking about the person next to them, not thinking about how somebody else may have been injured. If you ask me my last thought on this, I would just say that I believe there's a silent civil war going on, and that most of our community doesn't know. Like, when I was on this video with you guys on Saturday, the march looked one way. 30 minutes later, it was horrible. 30 minutes later, it was tear gas all throughout the streets. People were running for their lives. You heard shooting up one block, then you heard it down another block. They started blocking off the the entrances on the highway so you couldn't get onto the highway, not so that you couldn't get off this expressway, but so you couldn't get on. And it's tear gas and all through downtown, so that means people were stuck having to breathe in tear gas. I couldn't get to sleep till like 5 in the morning because I had the gas in my chest and I had to drink milk to try to, help with that. I really wish that our people could see how serious this is right now, how unfair the treatment is, and just really get it. Like, I don't think our people really get it. I think what we're being shown on the news is very different than the reality of what's going on out here.
And that's the reason.
8:30. Sir?
No, I'm saying that's the reason why we're doing Rolling Out News, and that's why we asked you to walk around and give us your honest assessment, because it kind of differs.
The assessment you need is at 9:15, not at 8:30. Like, if you see at 9:15 how this crowd is going to be treated, when you see how the police are going to start abusing people, when you start seeing tear gas get shot into crowds of people that are doing nothing get all wrong, when 10 minutes up the street you hear about a park, you're going to have white families outside playing football in the park. That's still the city of Atlanta. They don't have a lockdown. They don't have a curfew. So once 9:15 happens, if Rolling Out really wants to show the reality, I put my life in risk again, just so people can see what is really happening to your family, your children, people who could be your cousins, nieces, grandmas, or whoever. As soon as 9:15 happens, it's not going to be anything like this. You don't have guards in these buildings standing here like snipers for no reason. As soon as 9:15 happens and they have an excuse to say you were out after curfew, this is going to be an entirely different city.
Well, that is something that we're going to talk about in proceeding shows as we do this weekdays. So we will further talk about this issue in the proceeding shows. And I thank you for being a part of this show in the past, today, and we're looking forward to more reports in the future. So thank you very much for joining us and visiting with us, sir.
Well, thank you. I would ask you guys for one favor. I have a meeting with the governor's office this week where we're going to sit down and talk about a real initiative, like I said last time, where we want to look at what are some changes we can make into some policy, into some of the police unions, into some of the influence and impact we have on the internal affairs. I would like for you guys to actually help us connect with the right people. So it's not just, we actually have the power. If I'm getting the opportunity to sit down with our governor, I want to make sure we have the power behind it to make some kind of equitable change for all of our people. Like, I don't want to have a conversation. I want to have an impact.
Yeah, exactly. I understand what you're saying. And so, yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's something that we can talk about. But first, I wanted to say condolences to your friend to make sure that we memorialize your friend for losing his life the other day. So, yeah, we could definitely continue this conversation about this. So thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Mr. Steve, did you have anything else you wanted to say on the subject?
No, I want to tell Keith, you know, when you go to politicians, we understand what it is. Now, we know that we get invited to a lot of meetings. We got to be careful who we meet with, particularly when they have demonstrated their care and concern. I mean, let us not, you know, they often have surrogates, and see brothers who have great intentions become outmaneuvered by people who have super unintentional, but they're able to put on a face in a meeting. So let's talk about that, because what we don't want to do is create an ally with somebody who doesn't have the capacity to be honest and ally. And I remember, this is the same governor that wanted to open up early, opened up the tennis shoe places, the nail places. The same governor that opened up all these locations early. Now, he didn't follow 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 of the required processes he had to meet, benchmarks, knowing that it was going to impact our community in a devastating way. So I can't tell you how to manage your process, because everybody has a process. But I will remind you that when you hold a snake and you pick one up, you can never be surprised if it bites you. Because this is the same governor that invited those police officers and National Guards that you're talking about to be in our city.
But you know what? I agree with everything you're saying, and thank you so much for that word of advice, sir. Our mayor also invited, right? So the city of Atlanta is my client. Like,
but I wouldn't compare them in the same voice. Our mayor, just like you said, wanted to keep the city closed. Our mayor wanted to keep the city closed. You know, I don't want to say that politicians aren't the same. I'm saying they're not the same.
Yes, sir. I get
everybody has a different constituency. His constituency.
They've already started before 9 o'clock. I want y'all to see this. You see how the people are running? They've already started shooting the tear gas already, y'all.
Oh.
I just want y'all to see. This is what I want you guys to see. I want y'all to see what it's like once the police, once they turn up, man. And you see no violence out here. You see this.
That's what I was about to mention.
The families, there's children out here.
That's what I was about to mention. There was no indication of any uprising or any type of tumult, but despite that, they shooting already.
So, you know, something I want to point out to people, which is part of the police culture. It's like they're like, there's a box and we're given a set of instructions inside to work inside the box. We don't know how to think outside the box. We don't know how to use our common sense, at least on a certain group of people, of how to look at and say, you know what, this tactic, we can't do this right here, right now, because just because you can, or just because it's justified, doesn't mean that you should. So if you got a group of peaceful people, and what time is the curfew, at 9 o'clock?
Yes.
So why are they shooting tear gas? I know that's a rhetorical question.
You don't hear that? You don't hear them shooting the fire? You don't hear them shooting?
I'm just saying, I'm speaking from the standpoint of, is it necessary? Just telling the audience, no, it probably is not. Now, I'm not there. I don't know what they're being led by, but I'm just saying, all things considered, sometimes we unfortunately this is what causes problems, making these decisions without thinking them through. Just like we saw the officers pull the young people out of the car, the Morehouse and Spelman students.
I've been called a nigga by police officers so many times in my life that where I hear everything you're saying, but I've seen so much hatred. I mean, I go into schools with law enforcement agents. I partner with them, but I can't act like I haven't when my daughter passed, I was incarcerated because a judge told me that they didn't need another nigga at the funeral. You know what I mean? So I'm a person who, I don't just see it as making a bad decision. I see it as a lot of hate behind it also. And one thing is, if I'm willing to put my life in danger so that I can show what's going on, I'm gonna be honest. And the truth of it is I don't think it's just so simple of like not using good discretion. I think it's a lot of
but look, Keith, listen, I understand you got some trauma too, brother. But listen to me. My purpose is to teach you how we think. So when I say to you that it's some really unfortunate decision making, that's not to minimize whatever the hatred is, if that exists, or the racism, or any other systemic issues. I'm telling you, we need to know how police think so that you can be empowered. Not to say that nothing else is going on. That's all.
Yeah. Well, you guys have a good evening. Like I said, I really wanted y'all to be able to see the real truth of it. And this conversation.
No, and I appreciate
that. I had a friend that was killed last night. I watched somebody flip over in the car running from a police officer that was chasing them when they did nothing wrong and they died on the highway. I saw that Saturday night. That was pure hatred. So I mean, I hear everything you're saying, but I'm watching innocent people get killed right now. You know what I mean? So but I do hear you, and I thank you. Yeah. Being out here and seeing people running with their children right now. It's people running with their children right now. They did nothing at all. They're running with their children. That's not a bad decision. That's hate. That's pure hate. The army is mobilizing right here, right in front of us. It's not curfew. Nobody did anything wrong. That's hate. So, y'all have a good evening. Thank you.
No, thank you. Have a good night, sir.
Be safe.
Woo! Rolling out news report live. It's all the way live.
Are we? Look, y'all kicking me off now?
No, we just want to come back. I didn't want Keith to be there after 9. I mean, the whole idea is to be gone by 9. I think this ain't the party. Like they can't turn the lights on and turn the music off. And I think we're also in a pandemic when individuals have been locked up in their homes and have not gotten out in a long time. And so not only do they want to socialize, now they got a little anger and a little reason. And now it appears to be the season during a pandemic to get out and socialize and share based on the injustices that have occurred for the last 400 years that culminated, obviously, something that lit a spark across the world with the loss of George Floyd. But I think the constant videos, Terry, if you'll take us through what the last 3 weeks has shown cracks in the hidden system.
Well, yeah, I mean, I just think that I was going to ask our guest exactly what they thought that was unique about this particular situation, because there's sometimes it's just certain situations that takes it to the next level. And what made this one different than, say, Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and the guy in Central Park and so many other different situations? There's always seems to be that thing that takes it to the next level. This is greater than what we saw in 2014 with Mike Brown, and then a string of unarmed Black men and women getting shot and killed or choked to death, like Eric Garner in Staten Island in New York. This seems to be something next level. So what is it in your mind or in your soul that says there's something different about this, and this is why in my mind? And either one, I would like both of you to answer that question. Ms. Pruitt?
I wanted to say it's because we watched. Well, I was gonna say it's because we watched George Floyd die in front of our eyes, but we watched Eric Garner die too. But the difference is Mr. Floyd calling for his mother.
Oof.
Saying that he knew he was going to die. He expressed that. He says, y'all gonna kill me, basically. And there's something you cannot unsee about as he's saying that this guy just kept on kneeling with his hands in his pockets. It reminded me of when they were lynching our men, and then they had a little picnic, or they posed by the tree and take a photo for the postcard.
A family photo with the kids.
With the kids. So they can teach them how to hate too. And I'm not at all going to ever dispute Keith's experience that there's going to be some hate. But when we fight this disease that's systemic in the culture of policing, you got to know what your tools are. So the way you know what your tools are that you need to use is to know how the machine operates. If you don't know how the machine operates and you don't have the right tools, what you gonna do? Stand there and watch it spin? Because that's what's gonna happen. It's just gonna keep going. That's what's been happening. Yeah. Our community does not know how policing works from the inside out unless they've been a police officer. So we need to empower. We need to tell you how the Fourth Amendment works, all the details of that, what the exceptions to the Fourth Amendment are, why the Second Amendment is so important, and that it's not being used as it was written and meant to be. Those are the things we need to teach our community, besides having to talk and what to do when stopped by the police. We need to be teaching those things.
Right. And that's what I'm talking about. And that's why I think it was so important. And I'm so appreciative that you took the time to speak with us, to give us that unique perspective, and also to inform our community that change comes from inside and outside. Like, we can't throw rocks against the building. We have to be inside the building to help make change as well. So I appreciate you being here to share your perspective. And I also like to get Dr. Stevens, your perspective on what makes this unique in your mind, your soul, as you watch this unfold. And it seems to just mushroom like almost like a nuclear bomb. It just keeps mushrooming and getting bigger and bigger, and it just keeps taking different shapes. So what makes this different for you?
That the people that are being killed don't have weapons. It's easier to justify killing someone with a visible weapon over a mental one. And so, as we saw, the prison guard-esque scene earlier downtown with the guards up in buildings, snipers, if you will.
That was a great analogy, by the way.
With the armed guards walking around the streets. So, but no one there is brandishing weapons. When those white nationalists and everybody else was at the government building with their AK-47s.
At the University of Virginia, yes.
Yeah. And Michigan. Where were they then?
Yeah.
They were at the courthouse.
Yeah, they were at the courthouse. And you didn't, where was the National Guard? Because those weapons were visible. There's not one visible weapon. Not one. So, and it's easier to justify. And that's my whole point. And that's the message that I want to get out to the people that are protesting, even peacefully. They're trigger happy at this point. They're trigger happy. They are going to kill you and then say it was another protester, because where did the bullets come from? And so we have to educate ourselves, and I think that's lacking. In order to defeat your enemy, you have to know how they operate. You have to know how they work. You have to know how they strategize. And to find myself having to talk to teens about this as an infectious disease epidemiologist, now I'm talking political strategy. And it takes me back to my youth when I think the first time that I was protesting was in high school. I was at a PTA meeting protesting something. I think I was maybe 10th or 11th grade and ended up on the local news.
Mm.
And so being a Howard University student protesting.
Hate you?
Yes. Always protesting something. And I'm only like 5'4", so they had nicknamed me the militant midget. So, you know, that's what I'm saying. But as I got older and started enlarging my circle of friends, and I learned how other people think. So it was easier for me to be victorious over my enemies when I know how they think. And that's the message that I am trying to get out. And that's what's different. Civil rights movement, they were strategic. Most of them lived to fight another day because they had this skirmish. And that's what we need to tell our youth and our young people. These are skirmishes. This is not the war. And you're going to lose some of these skirmishes. You're not going to win every fight. You're not going to win every war. So you go back, you re-strategize, you de-escalate those emotions, and you figure out your next approach.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I have a very good Caucasian friend. She's a female executive that's like powerful. And she told me the very first book that she was told to read as a woman. We're allies for women, not necessarily on a racial front, but it's called The Art of War for Women.
Art of War. Yeah.
And there's one for women. And that's her playbook. And she bought me a copy and said, read it. Not that, and she said my experiences were going to be different from hers because of my skin color.
Right.
So the only thing that she could help me with was being a woman, the female side of it, the gender aspect of the wars that I would have to fight in the skirmishes. And so my message is protests are a prime time for the justified killing of Black people. And I tell the youth, don't be the one that's killed for no reason. Because I can guarantee you that they're going to die in vain. There will be no hashtags with their names, and they will be a part of the mass grave of names for those who stood up only to be shot down for the same cause for which they marched.
Well, look at Mr. Kirkland. He just lost his friend last night.
Exactly.
And there's no going to be no hashtag.
No hashtag.
No, it's just going to be some paperwork.
Exactly.
Dr. Stevens, you make these points are outstanding, and I know you're my HU sister, but I liken this whole ordeal at this time. Like when I saw the officers pull the kids out of the young people out of the car in Atlanta, I had a thought about domestic violence. You know how when the abused gets ready to leave the abuser, and that's when he or she really turns it up. Mm-hmm. And then that's the most dangerous time. That's where we are now, because now people are seeing that these Black folks really ain't trying to take this no more. And they like really, really, really for real not trying to take this no more. And so there's a lot of fear and a lot of angst and oh my gosh, and the hatred is on high. And so you're right. This is a dangerous, dangerous time for people and for our young people. I'm so proud of the young people out there marching. Okay. But we have got to teach them how to be safe. And like you said, how to be strategic.
How to be strategic.
That's an outstanding analogy that you just gave. That was beautiful in terms of that is where we are, because you're right. When an abuser gets to the point where he realizes, dang, I can't smack her around no more.
Right.
So I got to kill her.
She really about to leave me. She really about to try to stand on her own 2 feet.
Yep. She's brave. She's gotten brave. Where'd she get that from?
Right. Man, that's deep.
I
That's
can't buy her a gift and smooth it over and make it seem like it's okay.
Right.
That is an excellent analogy. Wow. Whew. Yeah, that's another reason why I like doing this show, because of the fact that the education comes from, it comes from different fronts. And so, and then analogy makes you look at something in a different way or a renewed way. And so, yeah, that was a great analogy about that. But moving forward, how do you guys feel, or what do you see happening, especially since not too far from this, Pruitt, probably just a couple of miles, it was made known that the act, and let me read it right, that the Insurrection Law of 1806, for the first time in almost 200 years, in more than 200 years, this thing has been excavated. It's been taken out of the grave, and stated that, we're going to have occupied forces throughout the cities of America if the weak governors don't get their act together. He called them weak. I mean, I've never heard a president say that to the governors. I thought it was about states' rights and, giving them their praise. And
he doesn't know what that is. This dude don't know nothing about the Constitution.
He
nothing.
Teleprompter wrong. I don't know.
And who's advising him? He got the main white supremacist up there in the White House with him, Stephen Miller.
Yeah.
I mean, what did we expect? We need to stop expecting something different from him.
Yeah.
Really.
I have zero expectations. This is like, it's almost like a cartoon. Where
But a dangerous cartoon.
Yeah. No, but I mean, there's no leadership. And it's like, and it's funny because as I was processing this today, I see it like the Wizard of Oz, and it's like, don't pay any attention to the man behind the curtain, because they feared the wizard, and the wizard didn't even exist. So that's why he's behind the curtain, projecting his voice and projecting a false sense of control, because he has none.
I gotta write that down. I'm gonna steal that.
All right, we've got about 7 minutes before we close, and I really want us to give some strategy to our community this evening, because it is very obvious that they need a little strategy to manage the do's and the don'ts, given the calamity and the confusion that is rampant in many of our cities. I'd like to start with you, Captain Pruitt, just a strategy on how our young people, our people in the uprising, not a riot, because there is a purpose for what they're doing. If we
I like that word, uprising.
Yeah, it's an uprising. I mean, they want to act like we just want to walk outside and hold up signs and all. No, this is an uprising. There's a purpose for this.
Yes. As you asked the question, I'm thinking to myself, just on this phone call, that I got some learning to do. And so I guess what I would advise, and I have 2 young people. I have 2 teenagers in my house who are asking me a lot of questions, especially today, since I've been on interviews all day. They're like, what you talking about? So I would ask young people to try, because we've all been younger, to stay open-minded, because they've got some wise sages out here who are ready to stand with them and protect them and to teach them. It's hard when you're young listening to somebody else, but when I talk to my young people, they listen. I know that their friends listen. And the best thing that we could do for them is to give them the torch, but just kind of teach them how to carry it, and then just let them go forward. Know what those tools are that you need, so that you can dismantle the machine.
Dr. Stevens?
And again, because I've been kind of talking to teens and young adults all day, don't help them marginalize you, because they're ignorant and they don't understand how the world really sees them. They're only operating out of the microcosm, like this small box that they are in their communities, and they don't know how the outside world works. So when someone gets in a car and drives from another state and they're like, oh, they're from so-and-so, so they must know how this works. So you have a bunch of people protesting and nobody really knows how it works. So you need to identify someone that can help you strategize. And it's like, I think I put it in my Instagram post today, like, know your lane. If you are immunocompromised, if you have a chronic disease, don't be out here protesting. You need to find another way to be productive, because every war has strategists, and not every person that strategizes is seen. So you need to create those people behind the scenes that are watching the news, watching how the police are moving, that have inside connections. And I still can't believe I'm sitting here saying this on this live. It's like telling people, because I mean, when you grow up in the hood and you have friends from the hood, it's like, you know, things. So I'll just say that. And I've been having to put on, like, they trust me because they know where I came from, and they know that I have their best interest at heart. And so you have to connect yourself with someone you can trust, because everybody that's out here holding up fists and signs don't have your best interest at heart.
Co-host Shropshire.
I mean, it sounds old. We've said it over and over again for decades and decades, but the best teacher is study. I'm a bibliophile, so I love to read, but I just think that, there's nothing to substitute studying, because it helps you to understand the playbook that the enemy uses to oppress, to destabilize. And if you just pay attention to the last set of insurrections, I like to call them, in America, uprisings, insurrections, there are certain playbooks where they set it off and we act like Pavlov's dog, and then we run to the streets. Then they assassinate the character of the person they just killed, as if they deserve what they had coming. Like this, like they did with up there in Minneapolis. I mean, why are they talking about a life that he no longer lives, as if he led it up to, because he went to Minneapolis to change his life. So he was no longer that guy. But that's what they use to try to justify what they have done. So the best way to understand how to beat the opponent is to study the opponent. I mean, even Dennis Rodman, as crazy as he was, he's a Hall of Famer because he studied like crazy. And so he understood what his opponent, his enemy, did, so that one of the best statements I've ever heard came from Bill Russell. We all know who Bill Russell is, and then I'll close it out. He said, it was the best commercial I've ever said because it was so powerful. He said, because I know my enemy, know my opponent and studied him so much. When the opponent, I knew when he wanted to shoot, where he'd like to shoot, how he'd like to shoot it, where he'd like to get the ball, so that I got my rebound before he even took the shot. Study, and you will know what your enemy is doing. And I'll close with that.
Well, I would like to thank Captain Pruitt for taking time away from her family to share with us insight from the mind of a public servant who has continued to serve.
With the servant's heart. Don't forget that part. That's important.
I would like to thank Dr. Captain Pruitt with the servant heart, and a mom with superpowers.
That too.
Our sister hero.
HU graduate. Captain extraordinaire.
Thank you.
For sharing her self, for being vulnerable in ways that we don't get to see, because it is not often that we see the vulnerability of those who are there to protect us, and an honest perspective on how we should operate ourselves and understand the inside. To Dr. Stevens, thank you for continuing to protect the public health of our community, even when it is absent in the minds of those of us in a pandemic, and for explaining how it is part of the expectation that we will let our health guard down. We need to understand how fragile health disparities have created these inequities that make our community fragile. Because they send us back from the emergency room with Robitussin to fight COVID-19 to go home to die. I mean, far too many have been sent home when they were sick and they had some lung capacity. Others are going, and by the time they come back on the second trip, they've got about 80 to 90% lung capacity and have to immediately be placed on a ventilator, where your survival rate is at a different level. So I want to say thanks to you, very low. To my co-host, First King James, Dr. Shropshire, you have been eloquent this evening in making sure we understand the historical and the intellectual ways we should approach having a strategy on thinking as a community and keeping up with all of those who have both male and female heroes. You know, to see a young man expire and call out to the person that we all love, our mothers. He was a hero. To the sister that did not even wake up, that was in her bed, dreaming of a life that was taken from her. A hero. To a brother who found a racist fan club to be lynched, videoed. They go off and have holiday with their families. Ahmaud Arbery, a real hero. But there have been several. And what I say is, we couldn't believe it when it was Trayvon Martin. Everybody just imagined it was not going to happen again. And then it just started to swirl again. And then we discounted it. But I want to say to all the young women who are on social media, you need to post with a purpose. Because Sandra Bland died and she posted with a purpose. If you have not heard or listened to her purpose and why she was traveling to help the next generation, then maybe you may not understand this movement. But this is a movement. And we are here at Rolling Out News Report to share that the movement will continue. And this movement will not be not only televised, but it will be spiritually transmitted to future generations because many of you have stood up. So I want to thank you all. I want to thank you for what you've given this evening. And we'll see you tomorrow night on Rolling Out News Report. Good night.
Hey, take care.
Bye.
Night.